What's up, podcast world? Chad Belding back at you. Another episode of This Life Ain't For Everybody podcast. Again, thank you all so much for the subscriptions, the ratings, the reviews, the growth. Truly humbling. Please continue to support the partners and sponsors that support all of our properties here at The Foul Life. This Life Ain't For Everybody, Jargon Banded. We truly appreciate it, and it's just awesome to see it. The network is growing, and we are very happy with the diversity we're bringing you in guests and topics and themes, conversation. If you want something specifically, don't be afraid to reach out, DM us, email us at info@thislifeaintforeverybody.com. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Mtn Ops. Check them out. Utah-based company. All of your supplemental needs. They work for the hunter, the fisher, the conservationist, the provider. They have the entire mountain mentality. So when it comes to all your supplements, your whey proteins, your BCAAs, anything that you need for that workout, that sleep, that fast that you want to go on, they even got some green drinks that they just introduced and more coming in the near future. Mtn Ops, thank you so much. Today's guest, I'm truly honored to have him on here. I've shared duck camp with him. I don't know if I would fight this guy. And I think you could tell a wrestler, if you go into a bar and you see ears that resemble vegetables, you don't mess with that guy. Is that a good analogy to make? Brent Metcalf, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me. And I would say, yeah, that's a pretty fair assumption. Ears, the guy's, he's done some form of fighting. Second guess your thought there.
Yeah, I think that what is it really, Brent? Let's get into it. Iowa State wrestling coach. I'm a huge, I don't know how to say it. Like, I guess I have like envy because I wasn't good at it and I didn't do it enough. And then when you look back on when you get to my age, and even way before this point in my life, I probably was in my late 20s where I really started to develop a yearning for it, or like a pissed off attitude that I didn't do it. Like, I really thought when I met the wrestlers in my life and their mentality and their leadership, the way they go about things, the way that they can be coachable, their toughness, their persistence, and everything that goes in to the wrestlers that I know, it just seems like they have a great foundation. And I grew up playing baseball and I have no regrets, but man, I just wish that for some reason, when I got in a little bit later in life, I just had this feeling come over me, Brent Metcalf, that man, I wish I would have been a wrestler. Do you hear that a lot with kids that don't? Because you're around wrestlers all the time. But do you ever hear that people wish they would have wrestled?
I don't know. I hear a lot of people say, I could never do that, which is wrong, because I would say most people could do it. And by that, I mean, sure, you'd have to get really tough, but it's within the ability of anybody to wrestle, right? But it's whether you can overcome those mental and physical hurdles through the sport, But what is it that makes the sport that way? I think it's a lot of different levels. One, it's tough, right? So it's mano a mano, so it's me versus you. There's no bat or there's no tool that you use. I mean, you're literally using my hands to fight against your hands, right? So that's a very hard thing. It's kind of, you could say macho, but it's very traditional. It's very whoever is the toughest. Now, there's a lot of technique in there and skill that can help. So regardless of how big and strong you are, I can still manipulate your strength with skill, right? Think of it like anything like a karate, or it's just another version of fighting, But what I think is really unique, and what you touch on the type of people that that are wrestlers and how they're great leaders and they have the right good sort of attitude and they're coachable, is because it is a humbling sport. And no matter how big and strong and tough you think you are, there's someone out there that can beat you, right? At the end of the day, and this is what I always really loved about the sport of wrestling, is that it's you and you only on the mat. So when you win, you know that you won because of the work that you put in, everything you did, right? But you also know when you lost that it was you and you only. You can't point at your coach. You can't point at this or that. You can only point at yourself. And that's why I love the sport so much. Is I use football as a good example. It's pretty easy when you lose a football game. I know everyone's a team. It's pretty easy to say, well, if John had caught that last throw and the touchdown, we would have won the game, right? So to some point, you have built-in excuses or built-in reasons for why you may not have had success. In wrestling, it's you and you only. You're the one that gets to control the outcome. And I think that allows you to have a lot of growth. Like I had said, it's very humbling. No matter how tough you think you are, or where you're at in your life and your career, there's someone that's going to unexpectedly come and beat you, and you're going to have to, if you want to continue to have success, you're going to have to be able to take that loss and, grow and move on from it. And it's life. Wrestling is life, right?
I think the way that I should have phrased it was, I can understand if you're 15 years old and you go into a high school wrestling room and get on the mat and you go through just a normal day of practicing, you're going to be like, this isn't for me. This is hard. This is like, my heart rate's up. I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. I don't know the maneuvers. And then there's the whole cutting weight. There's the whole making weight. There's the whole getting, lined up with your opponent and all of the rankings and all that. I think that if I would have went in as a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, and got into a wrestling club, and this is where I was going with it, Metcalf, is like if I was in there at a stage in my life to where by the time I'm 10, 11, 12, I got the technique down, the foundation, the mental toughness, the everything that goes into it. I think that you have a better chance of making it in the sport and developing those tough those tough attributes that you need to have to either be successful or at least be able to manage a loss, grow from a loss, learn from a loss, and take it to the next level and maybe defend that loss or, just keep your wrestling career going. I think that most people that say, I don't think I could do that, I think that they would have had a better chance of saying, I could do it if they would have been in it early. I think it's a harder sport to go into when you're 15 to 18 and try to catch up to those kids that have been learning a chicken wing or a high crotch or an ankle pick or a double leg takedown and all of the moves. And it's so the styles are so varied, and you got freestyle, you got Greco-Roman, you got collegiate, you have everything that you have to learn on those levels. But I just think that the earlier, the better. Is that fair to say?
It all depends. That's what's so funny and unique about our sport is that I think this is a fine balance. So we have in wrestling is we have, let's just call them crazy parents, and I'm sure that they're in every sport, right? But that get the kids involved so early and push them, and then they compete so much. And I don't really like the word burnout, but the real life matter is some of the best little kids don't even make it up to high school, right? Because they've been pushed and they've competed so much, and it is a hard sport that they don't even want to do it anymore. And think about the excitement that you've got to have every single day when you come to the wrestling room. That has to come from you. It can't come from dad said I have to come to practice, so I'm here, which happens a lot when kids are young. The kid has to be excited. That's how you're going to get the most out of your practice. So I found that there's certainly been stories where kids start with their 5 and they're unbelievable. But there's a way more stories of kids that start at their 5 and it's like, what happened to that guy? I think you got a good mix of. Here's a good example I use. Who do you think one of the greatest wrestlers we have in the United States right now is? Just pick one up. Who do you know? Who would be the best wrestler in the United States?
I would say my favorite 2 to watch right now are probably Burroughs and Spencer Lee.
Oh, Jordan Burroughs. When did he start wrestling?
9th grade.
8th grade.
Huh?
8th grade.
8th grade.
8th grade. So that's what's unique in that you could. And now Spencer Lee, I think Spencer's a guy who probably started when he was 6, right? So you've got 2 the best guys, 2 completely different trajectories, right? So I don't know if there's a prescription. I struggle with the same thing because I've got kids. I got 3 boys, and mine is my oldest is 7 right now. And of course, in Iowa, there's a lot of crazy parents, and they're like, "Hey, he's wrestling, right?" And I'm like, "He's not wrestling. He's not wrestling yet." And me trying to figure out what that kind of sweet spot for him is going to be when to introduce him to sport. Now, he's obviously around it most days of his life because of me and our team and stuff. But when the right time is to put him in so that it becomes his passion and that he, again, like I said, he's going to practice excited every day. It's not me just pushing them in there.
I think that's a great point. I think that is such a good way to look at it, to where if you go to a Little League baseball game and you see that fanatic parent, and then you look at sometimes the look in the kid's eyes and you're just like, man, and I've seen it happen 2 times with 2 different stud athletes in the last 2 seasons where they're done. They're just decide not to play baseball anymore. And it might be a burnout, or it might be like a way to stand up and say, look, man, you can't keep living through me. I can't keep living up to your expectations and I often ask myself, like, I'm a competitor, and I have nephews that are studs, and I have brothers that were studs, right? Baseball players and athletes and academics and all that. And I don't know. I asked myself, Metcalf, like, if I had a boy like they do, would I be that parent that was there every practice, like in their dish every day, and making sure that, that college was the next level, and we got to do all these, all these practice sessions on the side and stuff. I don't know. I don't think I would. I think that I have kind of pumped the brakes on that. That it's going to happen, and I've learned that through talking to guys that are like that are stud athletes, like George Brett. He was who George Brett is, being around the Missouri area. His sons all played high school football. None of them even played baseball. One of them kind of played baseball, but George was, his whole life was baseball, really. And he never once said, hey, you need to, he tells me in the podcast, I never push my kids to do anything, because I think that you get an understanding of life as you mature into it. Like, man, I don't know if I want my kids to even go through what I went through, or I don't want them to ever be let down. I was one of the few guys that made it to the major leagues. This is George Brett talking. I didn't make it to the major leagues, and I think that you kind of get that point of view from a lot of parents too, but at a younger age, they're just like, my kid's the best. He needs to be playing all the time. He needs to be a 4-sport athlete. But I have a weird thought process about wrestling that the kids that I knew that were in wrestling clubs and that continued into high school and played football and wrestled and then went on to college. And I know several that wrestled at the college level, ASU, Boise State. I don't even think Boise State has a program anymore, do they?
Nope.
I think they dropped. But I just knew that they just had something special. Now, let me ask you this. With the success of MMA and the popularity of MMA, and we are going to get into this discussion about how the background of wrestling is a huge advantage in MMA. Some of the greatest fighters of all time are favorites, like Hendo and Couture or Matt Hughes, or a lot of them had wrestling backgrounds.
Yeah.
Do you think with the explosion of that, Brent Metcalf, that it is getting people interested in wrestling at an earlier age to get them into a combat sport, to give them an MMA background some way?
I do believe that MMA has helped us and hurt us a little bit. I think it's normalized us a little bit. So by that, I mean, just surface level, you could say that most places you'd go around the country, pick Chicago, whatever, if you want to introduce a kid to wrestling, he's going to look at the wrestlers and see the singlet and think like, oh, that looks weird. Two guys rolling sweaty on top of each other, right? So it already starts with maybe a bad connotation about it. And I think that with MMA and what they're constantly, any of the fights you watch these days, they're constantly talking about, hey, this was this guy's wrestling stat. This was these are the things that he did, right? So I think that that's maybe an entry door that's going to maybe open somebody's mind and say, hey, I watched these really awesome MMA guys. They wrestled. Well, shoot, if they did it, then I want to try it too. On the flip side, I think it possibly does hurt us. And now I'm talking at the elitist level because now there's an opportunity, because what sucks about wrestling is there's no pro wrestling, right? You've got your Olympics, but the very best Olympians in their career are making what a football or baseball player would make in a year, So there's not really a substantial pro element to it. A lot of our best guys, and I thought it would happen faster, but it's not, but it's starting to creep that way, are dabbling a few years after college and then going right in MMA because there's more money there. It is what it is. And I think there's an appeal to it as well. So yeah, it's been double fold, but I think it's helped us in just making us more mainstream, if that makes sense. I think that there was a time probably when I was like in 05, when I was getting out of high school, I remember, where wrestling was really like not cool, and outside of the big wrestling communities, the state of Iowa being one, Pennsylvania being one, literally my town in Michigan and no other town, it was cool, but then outside of that, it wasn't, and it was losing popularity. So I do think it did help us there.
Some people are going to ask, like, who are you to tell us all of this stuff? And I probably need to introduce you in a way of making sure that my audience understands how strong you are in your credibility in this space, because I know what you've done because I went and dissected it, and I've been a wrestling fan my whole life. So I kind of have more of an understanding. And sometimes I tend to jump the gun because I get so excited to talk about, like, my next question would automatically be, well, would you take a wrestler that has good hands and can get on you and ground and pound and also tie you up against somebody that's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy that can use his body and his body weight to beat the biggest guys, no matter how big they are? There's a lot of argument in that, like the Hoist Gracie days against like a Dan Severn, when, in Dan Severn's wrestling career and at ASU and all that, like, Hoist Gracie beat him and Dan Severn beat him. So like it was there's a good argument there. But Brent Metcalf, were you one of the guys that was 5-year-old in a singlet winning a bunch of plaques and trophies to bring to your dad and mom's house?
No, I was close. I started when I was like 8 going on 9 years old. And how I started, no one in my family wrestled. I didn't even know what it was. I picked a flyer up off the ground that had a picture on it, like a really strong buff guy. I thought that the picture looked really cool. Didn't know what it was. So I picked it up and I said, Mom, Dad, let me try this. And after 2 weeks, we pretty much stopped everything else we were doing at the time and went full bore wrestling for the rest of my life.
Who was the guy? Was it Gable?
No, it was a picture. So, like a Martian, like
just a buff cartoon looking character.
Yeah. Someone had drawn like they literally had like a helmet on and like a singlet, and it just looked like a cool cartoon. Like, I don't know. I just picked it up. I was like, that's sweet. Let's try whatever this is.
So were you elevated right away? Did you have something that when you stepped in there at 8 or 9 that you became very good, very fast, or was it a big time learning curve for you?
I would say I was probably really good, really fast. And I think it's a lot of different reasons, maybe why. I mean, I did a lot of different sports, so I was certainly athletic. But I was also just really fortunate that the club, my community that we had, and this is something I was going to talk to you about earlier, as far as something that you said, well, you wish you would have tried. Well, that opportunity isn't there for a lot of kids, right? So even if you would have wanted to, let's say your community had no wrestling, you couldn't have done it. Or let's say the wrestling coach in your community was just a fat guy that also teaches football and baseball and all the other sports he doesn't know anything about, right? That is another barrier to entry. So, but either way, when we started, we had one of the best kids clubs in the state of Michigan. And I didn't know that. I just happened to be where I lived. So out of that kids club, when my age group, we had 3 NCAA champions from just little peewees. So 3 of us came out of that club and won national titles later on in life, right?
Wow.
That to me is ironic, right? That you just happen to have 3 guys that were all just there and started young. It also, we probably pushed each other, right? So that was another element. But I think that I had good coaches. I mean, even looking back and what I know now, they were teaching really good fundamentals, just good basic wrestling to us at that time, which I think is a good way to start kids. Start with basic stuff and get them, stick anything else, teach them the fundamentals. You get good at these things, then we can start expanding off of there. So I would say, as far as my career, my first year I wrestled, I was 3rd in the state. My second year I wrestled, I did not place in the state. Then my 3rd year, I won the state tournament, and then I won every state tournament until I got to high school. So
this starts at somewhere around 2nd grade, 2nd, 3rd grade. You start to wrestle. There's tournaments, there's state tournaments in Michigan for elementary school kids.
There are national tournaments for 4 and 5-year-olds.
Back then there were too.
Oh, so I don't know about back then because I imagine the close. So my 3rd year of wrestling is the first year I started to go to national tournaments. So yes, but when I was 8, that at least what it was at the time was 8 and under was the age bracket. So I started when I was 8 going on 9. So that first year I probably fit into the 8, and then it was 9 and 10. And I was the lower bracket, the lower age on my 2nd year. So
were you just abnormally gifted in strength at the size that you were at an 8, 9, 10-year-older, that you were throwing kids around and having your way with them? Or the second year you go in there and you don't place, were you getting thrown around and trying to adapt to it? What did you have to place 3rd? And then what happened where you didn't place? And then how do you come back? Yeah. I mean, obviously you start getting better with technique and practicing, but were you always abnormally strong?
I don't know. I mean, I was always pretty good at most sports, so I don't know if that's strength or what. I'm not a very big guy. Since I was a sophomore in high school, I've weighed 150 pounds. right? That's the weight class I wrestled. 145 my junior year in high school. And my last competition in 2016 was 143 pounds. I'm 5'6". So, I mean, I don't know. I would say I'm just pretty average, not very tall, short guy. But yeah, I think I was good at other sports. I don't know. I was doing BMX at the time, actually. So I was ranked nationally. I was like third in the country in BMX racing.
So your core strength's there, your balance is there, your equilibrium's there. Yeah. So you BMX, motocross, that's some of, like they say, I've had guys on this podcast tell me that motocross racers are the best athletes in the world with what they do with their bodies, their strength, their heart rate up for so long. But again, there's arguments behind that, obviously too. But so you have something special. You're gifted in athletics is pretty much what it is. But you go into wrestling, you just have this tenacity probably that you're finding a way to win. You're beating some kids. You're probably getting beat by other kids that have been doing it a little bit longer than you, have the upper advantage on technique. As you start to get into your 5th, 6th, 7th, and middle school years, you start to gain this technique. So you're saying that once you become a freshman in high school, which I would say across most of the part of the country is where people really start to see wrestling for the first time, when they go to the high school level, because out here, there's might be one club in the whole area for anybody to become a part of, like there's not every high school out here has a summer baseball team, but they don't all have wrestling programs. I think there's more lacrosse programs here, lacrosse clubs than there are wrestling clubs. So once you get to your 9th grade year, Brent, did you win the state championship every year in high school too?
Yeah, I was undefeated and won 4 state titles.
Wow. See, and now this is in a state of Michigan, which is is Michigan, is it considered a wrestling state? Like I know that Pennsylvania is, and I know that Iowa is.
It's probably second tier. Michigan's, which would be fair. So your top tier is going to be like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Iowa, maybe California there. But let's say there's 3 or 4 of your definitely very, very best. And then I would say Michigan kind of files in right behind those guys.
So you're walking around at the weight you're wrestling, or are you cutting to get to your high school weight of around 140?
In high school, I wrestled 145. I weighed 150.
Okay, so how much of this is an advantage to a wrestler? How detrimental is cutting weight for a wrestler or any kind of combat sports? That you got to spend a lot of your focus on the cut, and you're walking around 5 pounds heavy. You're concentrating on technique and just rolling because you're going to make weight easy. How important is that to the overall success of a wrestler with the cutting of the weight?
Again, it's a tough thing on how you want to manage it. So throughout my career, I didn't have to cut any weight because I could just, I could wrestle whatever weight I wanted to go, right? So it didn't require me to. There's guys that need to, right, where they can't make the lineup, or, there's a lot of arguments for why guys do cut weight. My general belief and philosophy is wrestle where you feel really good and strong, right? And that doesn't mean bump up a weight class or anything like that, but just wrestle the way. Yeah, I see it so many times. Guys are cutting so much weight that they feel like trash, and they can't even, if you can't get through practice, like if you had a bad practice and you came to me and said, Coach, it's because my weight cut, I feel crappy. Well, then stop cutting weight. Because if you can't practice, how you expect to get better? Like, what are we here for? Are we here to cut weight, or are we here to get better at wrestling? Let's find the balance between the two. So what we use for our college guys is like 6-7 pounds is usually the rule. So by that, I mean, whatever weight that you're going to wrestle, you should be over 6 or 7 pounds of that weight walking into practice. So the philosophy real quick behind that, just to maybe give a brief explanation, would be if I come into practice at 6 pounds over, after my warm up, I'm probably going to be about 4 pounds over my weight class, right? So after your warm up and your scales and stuff, you usually lose 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds. Now we start wrestling live in practice. So every day when you're wrestling live in practice, you're about 4 pounds overweight. Okay, so you're training at 4 pounds over your weight class. So when you make weight in college, we have, depending on it is, but generally a 1 hour weigh-in, sometimes a 2 hour weigh-in. How much weight do you think someone could put on in a 1 hour weigh-in?
Put on or lose? Put
on. So we make weight. All right. So you and I, we make weight.
I would say at the most 1/4 pound to 1/2 pound.
In an hour?
Yeah.
Something, right?
Huh?
You make weight. then you're going to drink something, you're going to eat something, and then you're going to go out and wrestle. So you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
In at 9 a.m. and we're going to wrestle at 10 a.m. So you're going to put on weight because you're going to feed yourself, right?
Yeah, but are you going to feed yourself enough to gain a substantial amount of weight?
You're going to feed yourself to gain 3 or 4 pounds, yeah.
In an hour, that doesn't inhibit you from having a good performance to eat that much that fast?
You ever try, I mean, you finish a workout and like you drink a
Gatorade or water, yeah. So how much weight do you gain?
So I would say 3 or 4 pounds. So the philosophy is every day that you're training, that 3 or 4 pounds overweight live in practice is the exact same weight that you will weigh when you're wrestling in your competition, right? So if you got an hour after weighing, you could guess I could probably put on 3 or 4 pounds, and that's about what I'm going to weigh, right? So we need to be training at that weight every single day. So that's kind of the philosophy behind how we like to do it. So how do we get there? If the guy's 15 pounds overweight, well, you got to get your body weight down, right? You got to get it. We got to have a goal and say, if you're 15 over, you need to start coming in at 7 over. All right. Well, usually what does they say about a pound or 2 a week? So we got to work that body down so that you start coming in, and then you hold that through the whole season. What will happen actually is if you're really good with it and disciplined with it, you're actually going to start losing more weight than what you want, and you'll actually end up eating a lot more. So after practices, you're going to end up eating more than what you're accustomed to try to keep your weight on, so that you don't keep sinking down to where you're coming into practice at 2 pounds over. Well, that doesn't do you a whole lot of good because now you're underweight training. Does that make sense?
100%. So you're saying, are there reputations out there of other programs or things that you've heard in your past or your history in wrestling, Brent, that guys are cutting way too much weight and it affects them physically, mentally, psychologically, and it could inhibit, them health-wise for the future? And that is why you guys at Iowa State and the coaching staff there, or is that a national thought of an ideology of 6 pounds for, maximum?
I think that the idea or philosophies behind cutting weight is a problem in the sport of wrestling pretty much up until college, pretty much. So it doesn't matter where a kid comes from. Most guys that come into our program do not understand the correct way to cut weight. And you can put that on their coaches, their parents. It's just a lack of education. I remember when I was growing up, we didn't know what we were doing. I remember the first national tournament we went to, and when you're young, it's hard to cut weight. Little kids don't really lose weight. I remember taking pee pills and poop pills and all these different things that people said were, hey, that's how you're going to lose the extra couple pounds to get down, and these are just horrible suggestions. So it's especially in young kids, it's a really big thing and it's a bad thing, right? So it's a really big thing that we're talking about these 5-6-year-old national level tournaments. These kids are cutting weight, even the 7, 8, they're cutting a lot of weight. I've walked into some of these kids' practices. These kids look like they're going to die at practice because they're cutting weight, So
do you just want to grab their parents and shake them, or is it their coach's fault, or is it a combination of both?
It's all three. There's probably go around to everybody, and the kids bought in too, because the kid got his butt kicked at the last time he wrestled. And he thought, well, if I go down to the next weight class, I got a better shot down there. Well, maybe you do, but maybe you don't, because you're going to feel like trash too, So as far as, let's bring it back up to the college level. I would say that most college coaches understand the right way to do it. And I wouldn't say that's a problem by any means like that or anything like that. I think that at the end of the day, what it comes down to is now getting your 25 athletes that you have on your team, or 10. All right. So we've got 10 starting line, getting all 10 to buy in and do it right. Right. So as far as different programs go, and I'm not going to judge whether, we certainly have had our own share of guys who don't do it right, but it's something that you can glaringly see throughout a season when I wouldn't say a whole program necessarily does it, but you can see individuals like, all right, if that guy notoriously gets really tired and he notoriously is winning matches and loses, a lot of that time is just because he's not cutting his weight right, And again, you can put that on the coach, on the individual athlete. There's a lot of things to go around, but that becomes a huge difference maker when it comes to college. is how right you can do it, because we only got 1 hour weigh-in. In most places you go, there's wiggle room because those kids tournaments, maybe say they got 2 hour weigh-ins. Sometimes they have overnight weigh-ins. They're weighing in the night before. So yeah, I mean, generally most kids can kind of recover an overnight weigh-in. But 1 hour weigh-in, you see really fast which guys are doing it right and which guys are doing it wrong.
Makes total sense.
Operate when you don't have the juice, So there.
So you every high school season you're winning, and then when the high school season's over, are you traveling to Vegas and Reno, Nevada for the TOCs, the Tournament of Champions? Are you going to these big time national tournaments and still getting the same success against competition across the country?
Yeah, generally, yeah. So there's a lot more opportunities now, like big national level tournaments. When I was in high school, we essentially had your high school season, and then after your high school season, you had a freestyle season, which had like junior duels, which is like where states compete with each other in a dual meet format. And then it all leads up to Fargo, which is the big freestyle national tournament. So I won Fargo 7 times of 7 out of 8.
And that's the biggest freestyle tournament in the country for kids that are seniors or younger that haven't been to college yet.
Yeah, high school age, yep.
Because the TOCs has college athletes in it too, right? Is that right, or is it just high school also?
No, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Tournament champions, there's a bunch of different tournaments.
Yeah, so you never came to Reno for the big wrestling tournament here called the TOCs?
That'd be a kids tournament. Yep. That'd be probably under high school.
Under high school, yeah. Okay. Yep. So you're winning across the country. So now you get into your senior year. You're undefeated. You've won the Fargo every time you've entered it, pretty much. You're undefeated through your high school career. Are you also undefeated in your summer freestyle tournaments too? Pretty much.
Yeah. Yep. I pretty much trying to remember my record. I'd hate for someone to jump up and say, "Hey, I beat you," but yeah, I pretty much had won all throughout high school.
Wow.
Losing going on. I know early on, like my freshman, sophomore year, so there's different age levels. So it's cadet and then junior. So junior would be the kids that are like seniors and juniors in high school. Cadets would be sophomore, freshmen, just to make it simple.
Okay.
I was a sophomore, freshman. I would wrestle the junior level competitions. So I definitely took some losses at that during that earlier period. But my junior and senior year, I didn't. Until after my senior year, senior nationals, I did lose in the finals to like an arch rival of mine that we had wrestled our senior year. It kind of went big on the internet, and I ended up winning during the high school season. But then after season was over, we wrestled in another side tournament. He ended up beating.
Did you ever wrestle him again after that side tournament?
I did, yeah. He actually went on to win the NCAA championships his true freshman year in college while I was redshirting. And then, long story short, I ended up transferring to Iowa. Him and I wrestled in the Big Ten finals, and I won that one.
Okay, so you're a senior in high school now. What's showing up in the mailbox as far as recruiting letters? What's the interest level like for Brent Metcalf? Is it insanity like you hear about in some sports? With that record, I would think that every major college program I'm just saying them from today, but from the Dakotas and the Iowas, the Pennsylvanias, the Minnesotas, the Oklahoma States, the Oklahoma. Are you getting it from every angle now? Are you like a prodigy that everybody wants with that kind of a record in your talent level?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a unique thing. So I had an older brother who was very, very good as well.
Wait a minute. Before you go on with that, was he wrestling when you decided to go into it when you were a young kid, when you were a bike racer?
I started.
You started first. Okay.
He was playing basketball, and same thing. I started coming home with all these fancy moves and whooping up on him. Basketball after 2 weeks, and he started wrestling. And then we were all in after that.
You can't blame him.
Yeah. So he was really good. So he actually was wrestling at the University of Michigan. So the recruiting process, certainly I was hit up from every school. Actually, I kind of joke with John Smith, who's the head coach at Oklahoma State now. He didn't recruit me. So I kind of gave him a hard time about not recruiting me. But outside of that, yeah, it was pretty much most places, but it wasn't craziness because I think a lot of programs thought I was just going to go to the University of Michigan because my brother was there and I had a great relationship with them there. And it was just kind of ironic that for whatever reason, I just wanted to leave the state. I wanted to do something different. So my mind the entire time, for no reason, like nothing against Michigan, I just, something in my head was like, I'm going to go do something different for fun. So it wasn't chaos like maybe it could have been, because I had coaches that would call and say, hey, I know your brother's at Michigan. You're probably going to go there, but, just so you know, we are interested in you, if that makes sense. So yeah, I had a lot of options and kind of whittled them down. And
so take us down that road. What happens? Are the coaches coming and watching you? Are they coming on National Letter of Intent Signing Day? Do you have a big little gala there at the high school and a singlet laid out over the table with a hat? How does it go? Take me after your senior year when you start to get into your signing for your college.
Yeah, so we sign our junior. Well, let's just say your senior the fall. So we sign really early before your senior season actually happens. Basically, I had broke it down to 5 different schools. Let's see, my schools were Michigan, Arizona State, Virginia Tech, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Those are the ones I had gotten it down to. And when I was going through, I just judged it off of coaches' relationships. So where I ended up choosing to go to school, which was Virginia Tech, was definitely the worst program in the entire country. But I did it off of relationships and how I felt the coach was going to help me. I was less concerned about how much gear they had or, how cool their program was. That's just kind of how I was wired. And I felt that the coach is what was going to push me on a day-to-day basis, right? Regardless of who my partners were. I knew if I had a coach that hold me accountable, that I would get to where I wanted to be. So yeah, I went on 4 of my visits. After my visit to Virginia Tech, I kind of knew I was going there. So I called the last coach and told him I wasn't coming on the visit because I don't want to waste his time. And just kind of made my decision then. It was a different world though. We didn't have Twitter and social media. Announcements weren't made publicly like that. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Basically, I just called the coaches up and let them know, like, hey, I'm not going to go to your school. And I called the Virginia Tech coach and said, hey, I'm coming to your school. And then that was it. That was all. You don't have what more or less is like a damn production these days.
Yeah.
Kids to make their announcement and dwindle it down to the final 2 and stuff. That wasn't, as far as I knew, that wasn't really a thing back then. So we had like a signing, if I remember correctly. We're like your high school.
Okay, so is the local paper there taking pictures and you're on the front page that local stud is going to Virginia Tech and then
something like that.
Then did the haters come out locally and say, what the hell, Metcalf, your brother's right here, he's a Wolverine and you're dissing us like this?
No, I didn't get too much hate, although I did have a funny story. So Tom Brands, who was the coach at Virginia Tech who recruited me to go to school there, he was at my house and I don't remember why for some reason I wasn't at the house. Maybe he beat me there or something. He was just coming to see me. And I was driving and I was speeding. And I got pulled over by a cop and I pull into my driveway because I was just almost home. And he pulls in behind me and he's talking to me and he asked for my license. I give him my license. And the first thing the cop says, he goes, oh, Metcalf. He goes, why are you going to Virginia? Why wouldn't you go to some school like Iowa? And I was and I look up and Tom Brands is walking down the driveway at me. And I'm like, well, you asked my coach. There's my coach right there. And then the funny story is I end up in Iowa at the end of the day.
So tell me how that happens after you get to Virginia, down to Virginia, what happens with the program there? Did you figure out something? Was it a transfer of a coach or how did it roll?
Yeah, it was the head coach. So year 1 there's a whole lot of story here, but Tom Brands was kind of an Iowa legend, right? Product of Gable. And he took that job at Virginia Tech. So I went to school there, and a bunch of Iowa kids went to school there. It was number 1 ranked recruiting class. I went to Virginia Tech, who was the last ranked program in the country. And after 1 year, not even 1 year, because we hadn't even finished our first year yet, he had got the job offer to come back to Iowa, essentially.
And you
right?
can't say no to that.
No, you can't blame him for that, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, he had taken that job, and we all went to obviously to that school for that coach. So we all transferred and ended up at Iowa anyways.
So you made mention that the kid that you lost to in the senior finals or the senior in the tournament was he becomes a true freshman NCAA champion. You redshirted at Virginia Tech.
Yep.
Why is this? Is because there was somebody there, or did you know that did you have to sit out? Did you have to sit out another year when you transferred to Iowa now?
I would have to tease my coach at the time. So when I was recruited, part of the stipulation was that if I can make the team, I get to make the team, or I get to start, right? Because again, like I believed in myself. I thought I could win the nationals right off the bat, right? And when I got to campus, like being a college coach now, usually you want to redshirt you guys because especially when you got a team like that, you want to stack up your classes together, you know? So when I got to campus, the coach was like, yeah, listen, you ain't wrestling. You're redshirt.
Really?
What? So, no, there was never a tryout for that team. So it was, I jokingly say he lied to me about, whether I was going to.
So when you see Brands these days, you still mess with him quite a bit on that. But now when you leave to come into Iowa with Brands, do you have to redshirt again with the NCAA collegiate transfer?
I did lose a year eligibility. So it's not a red shirt. It's just you lost year eligibility, which means.
So now you're a sophomore when you get to.
Yeah. So I only had 3 years eligibility.
Sophomore, junior, senior season's ready now. So now take me through this. This is big time now. This is like where college wrestling has I would say its national backbone and its national history. I would think, as far as I think the armchair quarterback or the armchair enthusiast like myself, I think of Iowa. I think of Dan Gable. I think of the stories, the relentlessness, the whole mentality of him. All right. I think that Iowa is probably what most of America's wrestling has been built on, or at least the tradition of it, what most people know. That might be immature or premature to say. I'm just assuming because of the history of Dan Gable and the Iowa Hawkeye wrestling program. Now, this is a huge thing for you. Why do you, at this time, is Iowa a national powerhouse?
Iowa is down, and by down I mean I think that they had placed 8th and then 2nd.
So what was the reason coming out of high school in Michigan for Brent Metcalf that you didn't get recruited, or did you by Iowa and it just wasn't one of your final 5? I
did, and again, remember I made my choices by the relationship that I have with the coaches. And Jimmy Zaleski, who was the coach at the time, who I actually know him really well now. He's a great guy. Just when he recruited me, it just for whatever reason, it didn't spark me. So
what was your relationship with like at ASU? How did you know the coach there? Or why did you narrow it down?
So yeah, everyone kind of had a different connection. So Arizona State, I had grown up with their assistant coach. I had grown up with his family.
Okay. So he was from Michigan.
Yeah. Right. So I just had a connection with that coach already. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I get it. Let me compare it to something a little bit more useful in my everyday life, Brent Metcalf. I only go to sushi bars that I have a relationship with. I think you get treated a lot better by the chefs. They take better care of you. You get their special rolls. You don't have to just order off the menu. They call you by your name. You know what I'm saying? It's you got that. You have that. You got that fuzzy feeling when you're in there. So now you're at Iowa. This is the cream of the crop. This is like every kid's dream to be in an Iowa Hawkeye. Obviously, you're there for different reasons. You could have gone there. You just chose not to because they were down at the time, or you didn't have a relationship with Zaleski. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Okay. So now you get there. Now you do have a relationship with the same coach. The reason why you went to Virginia Tech, is it a completely different mentality than you were experiencing your freshman year? Was it way different than high school and all of your career was so far? Was it just like, man, this is Iowa?
As far as the room goes, no. So nothing was different because it's the same coach, right? So the approach that we had at Virginia Tech and the way that practices were run, everything's all the same. The level, your partners were maybe a little bit better because they had a little more depth at the time, but I was a hammer too. So I came in and hit the ground running and swinging per se, right? So what was mind opening to me though was the culture of Iowa wrestling, right? And not just to say the University of Iowa, but just the entire state in general, is to listen or to be in that environment where these people love wrestling more than anything on the face of the earth. And it was so different than what I grew up on, obviously different than Virginia Tech, but that was something that was unbelievable to me and that I fell in love with. And the reason why I'm still here in this state, well, generally, is because the passion these people have for the sport of wrestling. No matter where you go, whether you're having breakfast at the local diner or you're just bumping into people, people know who you are. And it's not about being popular or celebrity, but it's still cool. It's cool to feel appreciated. It's cool. And I explain this to our guys, when you're training and you're going through all that hard work, you need to tap into some resources to motivate you. And to me, it's really motivating to know that every day when I walk into my local diner and have breakfast, that guy's paying attention to what I do as an athlete. Okay. And he's going to essentially hold me accountable. Okay. So that's motivating, that I know that old Johnny up at the cook and bake there is watching me, and he's going to evaluate my performance, So that's something that I just loved, was just how much just the state of Iowa loved wrestling, and they appreciated you. And that's something really fun to wrestle in. It's a fun environment to live in,
Do you remember your first duel, Brent, as an Iowa Hawkeye?
Oh, shoot.
How does this stuff not stick in your head, dude? You're a freaking Iowa. Like, how do you remember any of your matches, or do they become so monotonous? Do they become so like every day to you because you're always wrestling at such a high caliber that it's hard for you to think back and pick them apart and analyze them? Or would you need to go back to the tape to do that?
I would definitely go back to tape for some of them. I have ones that stick out, but the way that I was wired, so good, bad, or different, the way that I was wired was always looking forward, right? So I was a college athlete. When I stepped on campus, I didn't necessarily revel in my first college duel, right? Because my goal was not to wrestle in an Iowa singlet in front of an Iowa crowd. So that moment was not maybe something, whether that's wrong, maybe I should have, right? That moment wasn't something I looked forward to my entire life, right? The moment that I look forward to my entire life was being an NCAA champion. Okay. So that's the moment that sticks with me. Okay. And I have moments in matches that stuck with me, but to me, that was part of the process. Now, do I remember those duels? Yeah. And could you pull up, remember this first match? Boom, it'd come right back. But that's maybe how I would evaluate why I can't tell you right now what my first duel was, is because
makes total sense.
Just business as usual, man. Going to whoop some ass.
Did you win it?
Yeah, I won every match.
So take me through those 3 years now, but kind of go slow. I want a little bit of detail. Like, now you're a sophomore. You've never wrestled in the state of Iowa. You're this kid from Michigan, but you're there because the coach brought you. He recruited you. Real quick, though, tell me, what was the connection to Tom before you signed with Virginia Tech, before we go on to the Iowa days?
Yeah, again, each one had its own little story. So when I was young, probably 10, maybe my third or fourth year into wrestling, my high school coach, whose name was Roy Hall, my parents would pay him, I don't know, I'd say $100 to come over and just do individual lessons with us, right, at home. And the first day he walked in, he took a video, which was VHS at the time, dude, no DVDs, okay? VHS.
Hey, what's a DVD? I think those are even obsolete now, aren't they?
Yeah. I know, these were finger twirl. You want to
you got
to twist your fingers. So he put a VHS in of Tom and Terry Brands, which are two twin brothers, and Tom was the coach. And he put it in and played it, and it went for 30, 40 minutes, I remember. And after he got done, he said, "You guys want to be the best at wrestling? You're going to wrestle like that." And he would play it every time he'd come over. We'd watch more of it. So my foundation of my wrestling was built on the philosophy of these two guys.
Wow, that's cool.
Because again, there's no social media. There's hardly even magazines. So I don't even know who these people are. I don't even know who Dan Gable is, right? All I know is I'm just some kid that a coach put a person in front of me and said, "Wrestle like this. You see what they do? You wrestle like that. You see that intensity? That's how we wrestle." So every time I wrestle, and if I lose or win or whatever, I'm evaluating myself on this film that I watched, which I couldn't even tell you what the film was, but but I remember the intensity. I remember the pace. I remember like you continue to score points. You know, those sorts of philosophies were just driven into me as a very, very young age.
And what was it about the when the video's playing, what's going through your head? Is it like, whoa, those guys are like on a different level of mean? Was their technique like perfected? What did they have? Was it just the intensity, or was it just like, wow, those dudes their technique was perfect. They're throwing each other around. Their shots are awesome. Like what gravitated you towards that?
It would be the intensity. It would be, wow, that looks fun. Right. And it's sick. Again, wrestling's kind of a sick sport, right? So you got to get off on being able to whoop someone's ass. Right.
Yeah.
As much as it's not a hand fighting contest, like you got to really enjoy punishing someone. Right. You have to like that. I have to like that you and I can go toe to toe and I can basically, I'm going to make you cry. Right. Legally. Right. So again, we're not punching each other, but on those terms, as far as mentality goes. Okay. And that's what I loved. I loved the fight, and I loved, again, not punching, but I loved the fight. And I loved to completely humiliate someone as far as within the rules of our sport. I loved it. It made me feel good. It made me feel powerful. Right. So I love that. And then match is over. Now we can respect each other and shake hands and walk off. Right. You don't have to be a jackass or anything, but that's when I say you got to be sick a little bit. Some of the best wrestlers, you got to be a little sick in the head.
So, you know? but sick in the head a little bit, but you're like this on the mat. You humiliated dudes, beat his ass, shake his hand. They raise your arm. The crowd goes crazy. They cheer for you. Do you walk off? Are you doing this on the playground? Are you disrespecting kids and using your ability and strength? Or is wrestling teaching you at a young age that respect of to not let it come out?
It's teaching you that respect, because absolutely not. You don't pick on people. Are you kidding me?
That's what I've always seen in wrestlers.
Yeah, no. It teaches you that, because in a flip of an eye, you could think you're pretty tough, and then the opposite happens to you. And you know what? You got to stand there and look at that guy in the eye and let his hand get raised. And then you need to walk off that mat without throwing a fit and wipe your tears off and go back to battle again, because the tournament isn't over yet. You got to go try again, right? So that's where we started with this, as far as how it's the ultimate humbling sport is, no matter how tough you think you are, there's always someone that can bring you back down. Everyone's going to have moments in their life where they're brought back down. So, no, I would almost guarantee that most wrestlers are not going to be the guys that are bullies, okay? Think of it a way. It's funny. It's hard. When you think of wrestling and basketball, you don't think that they're anything alike, right? But when you read quotes from Michael Jordan, his mentality and the way that he talks about what he wanted to do. Now, his way of dominating and his way of embarrassing people was by making baskets, right? Our way of doing it, just we happen to use our
But
hand.
he learned how to be a champion through failure.
But you listen to his quotes, and he's dead on, as far as my mentality, as far as when you read it, you're like, yeah, you think that guy could have been a wrestler.
Could have been, yeah.
He gets it. He gets how to separate himself from people.
So you are in an Iowa Hawkeye singlet, your first duel. I'm going to assume that you won. Okay.
I did.
So what does it look like at the end of that sophomore year, which is theoretically your first year in college wrestling? You're at an NCAA Division I powerhouse of Iowa, which would later on, become a powerhouse again. And it's had its ups and downs like every school does. But where do you stand at the end of your sophomore year?
I won the national title in 2008. Yep.
So now does this drive you nuts even more now that they looked at you when you walked on the campus at Virginia Tech and say, Brent Metcalf, you're redshirting, because your goal was to win it as a freshman. Now that kid that beat you in Michigan is a senior and you guys went back and forth, you ended up beating him later on in your career. But now does he have one up on you because he's a true freshman NCAA champion?
No, because I beat him that year. We wrestled that year.
Of your sophomore year?
Yep. We wrestled in the Big Ten finals.
So as he's a champ, he's defending his champion. He comes into the Big Ten finals. And I don't know if you told me or if I forgot. I apologize if I did. Who's he wrestling for?
Minnesota.
Okay, you didn't tell me. So he's a Gopher. Yeah. He comes into the Big Ten finals, which is probably as big as the NCAAs in many ways. I don't know if that's it's kind of fair to say because there are tournaments. It's like in duck calling. You're a duck hunter. You're a hunter. If you go to Stuttgart at the World Championships every Thanksgiving weekend at the World Duck Calling Championships, but you get there a day earlier and you watch the Arkansas State Championship, you're like, wow, that might as well just be the World Championship, right? Because that's where all the studs live, right? But it's weird because there are, in the history of duck calling, a correlation that you and I share is that there are champions from the state of Iowa. Bernie Boyle, Barney Califf. Barney Califf won the World Duck Calling Championship on 3 different calls. So like Iowa's the other powerhouse in duck calling, which you would never expect that, but it is. Really? Yeah. So, but there are other states like Louisiana's up anyway, but back to wrestling. You face this kid. He's coming in to defend his title as an NCAA champion. And I'm just picturing him like, oh, it's not this SOB again. Now he's got Brent Metcalf in his headlights again. He's got to get through Brent Metcalf to go to the NCAAs, or does he automatically qualify for the NCAAs being a champion? How does that work?
Qualified, so top 7 qualify.
Top seven qualify. So he goes into the NCAAs his sophomore year after winning it his true freshman year. He goes in there now already getting beat in the Big Tens by his nemesis.
Nemesis since, so that's another story, but that's nemesis since we were children.
Since you're kids. Wow, what a story, man.
Same age as my older brother. And every national tournament we went to, we butted heads. I would wrestle Dustin. My brother would wrestle CP. We just, as we grew up, we matched each other every time we left the state, it seemed like. So, and he won most of those. I would give him that. He won when we were kids. He won.
Do you still talk to this guy?
No, I mean, I don't think I have his phone number or anything like that.
So freshman year.
Say hi. I think we'd be good.
You'd be cool.
We're grown adults.
NCAA champion your sophomore year of college. Probably would have been a freshman champion if you didn't redshirt. Who knows? So now you go into what happens in between. Is there a freestyle tournament for collegians that you start traveling now right away? And what do you do in the summer in between your sophomore and junior year?
So that's 2008. So that's actually the Olympic trials. So I wrestled in the Olympic trials that year. I maybe went. Maybe went like 2-2 or something like that. So when I was young, or I just call it young, but when I was in college, I was wrestling and trying to compete at the world and Olympic level, So to me, and how I looked at it was like, that was my thing that would bring me back down, right? It would remind me. So that first year, I had 1 loss all that first year, but it would, the minute you think you're the man, so you went your first year into college, you win the national title, and you think you're the man, right? Well, now you go and wrestle at this next level, and you can't even place, So that's kind of how I looked at it. It was like, hey, this was my bar, right? I'm going to set my bar way up here. And to me, how I believed that the higher I set that bar, the farther I would get myself.
This is a very humbling experience for many athletes in the country, in many sports, right? Brent Metcalf, you are a big fish in a small pond. You get recruited. You get to that bigger pond, and all of a sudden you get humbled in a hurry. And I've seen it happen in baseball, football, to where they get to that next level and they get lost because they're not used to even having anybody remotely close to their talent level. So either their ego gets tarnished, or they get beat out. They lose their starting position. It happens all the time. So I could see it very easily in wrestling, to where you go from being a big fish in a high school program, you get to college, you get your butt whipped. You're not doing that. You're winning in college. So now you're taking that NCAA reputation, but you're still got to go to a bigger pond. You're trying to make a wrestling team. So now you're probably wrestling guys. In what age range does that count that you go to Olympic trial? You're an 18-year-old, you're 19. You might be close to 20 years old at this time. Who are you wrestling?
So your age group in those Olympic trials, usually between 27 and 33. I think 35 is going to be the max that most guys wrestle. So, but yeah, it's usually that above 25 all the way up to the 30s.
So now you're going against guys that are way bigger fishes, huh?
Yeah. In fact, the guy that made the Olympic team that year was my assistant coach. So he was my college coach. Another one that we had there at the University of Iowa. He was the guy that made the Olympic team.
Did you wrestle him in the trials?
I did not wrestle him in that trials. No.
What was his name?
a different guy, Doug Schwab.
Doug Schwab. So what
At that
happens?
point, you're trying to beat your college coach, you know?
So what does this do? Does this just drive you more now that when you don't make the Olympic team, you go now your summer goes into your junior year at Iowa. You're training, you're staying in shape, you're walking around at 145 to 148 pounds, you're wrestling right around the same weight. So what happens your junior year? Same results?
Junior year, I kind of go on a tear. So just quick, brief summary. So that first year, like my second match in, I got caught and pinned by a kid named Darian Caldwell. And then I went on to win the national title in 08, and I didn't lose. And then I continued to go on a tear and make it all the way to the second year. I hadn't lost all the way up until the national finals. And then I'm wrestling Darian Caldwell again in the national finals.
Is this the same Darian Caldwell that's the Bellator champion?
It is the same guy, yeah.
Really? So tell me this.
Every time a dude has a fight, our wrestling match gets brought back up again.
They show it all the time.
Yeah, it must be a good way to, I don't know, get clicks or something. But I know he's fighting when like my social media is getting blown up with like him and I wrestling.
So he catches you and pins you your second match or your second duel going in your junior season, and then you wrestle him again.
No. In my first season.
Your first season as a sophomore. Mm-hmm. So did you wrestle Caldwell? Did you wrestle him in the NCAAs or the Big Tens your sophomore year?
Nope. We actually wrestled in an all-star duel. So you had my sophomore year, I won the nationals, and then before the season starts, they do like an all-star match. So they matched me and him up. I actually tech faulted him during that time, so I beat him by 15 points.
And then
the season goes on, and I rip through everybody, and then I have him again in the national finals, and he beats me.
What happened? You tech fall him not a couple months before, and then how do you lose? How do you lose in the NCAA finals? I'm saying, how did he beat you? Was it points or was it pin or what?
Yeah, he beat me. I mean, the quick version is one, he came out on a tear and scored some early points, and then there's two kind of critical points where I'm in on a takedown, like almost ready to score, and we're on the edge of the mat, and he kind of just scrambles around and ends up on top. And that happens twice in two different points in the match, which basically swings the match there, you know? So how did he beat me? He out-wrestled me. I mean, is that simple?
This is the final, though. This is for the NCAA title.
The finals,
So he's the champion now. So now you're runner-up your junior year.
Runner-up my junior year, yeah.
So now you go into your summer freestyle wrestling in the summertime. Are you winning all throughout the summer in between your junior and senior year?
So that summer I did better. I made the world team finals. So I was actually, how did it end up that year? Well, basically U.S. Open. So at that senior level, I wrestled our U.S. Open and I was second place. So I went from the year before not placing to second place. So there was an improvement at that level.
Is the U.S. Open that you play second in between your junior and senior year, Brent, the same age group as the Olympic trials the year before?
Yes, same group of guys. Yep. All the guys wrestling to wrestle on the Olympic or world level. Yep.
Wow. So at this time, are there
extra motivated and didn't take any time off and went right back into training and, to wrestle in that tournament. So
are there tournaments at the same time like you see today, like the Beat the Streets and all of the tournaments is that going on too? Are you traveling to these as well?
Yeah, those were going on. Yep. I wrestled in pretty much every Beat the Streets up until about I didn't wrestle in 2012's Beat the Street, but I wrestled in all of them up until I was.
Were you winning Beat the Streets at all?
Yeah, I won all my Beat the Street matches. Yep. So first one we did was on an aircraft carrier, and then we did a couple of them in Times Square, which was a lot of fun, and then we did one in like the lobby of not Times Square, but the station.
Grand Central.
Grand Central Station, yeah.
So now you go into your senior year. You play second in the worlds, the U.S. Open on the world for the world team.
Like just call it the U.S. Nationals.
U.S. Nationals, and then you go into your senior year as an Iowa Hawkeye. Now you're more driven. Now where is this Darian kid? Is he graduated or is he still around?
No, he's still around.
So what happens your senior year?
my senior year, I go through and I win all my matches. I actually lose in the Big Ten finals. Same thing. I mean, I had a close match with the guy I always had a close match with. I'd beaten him probably 5 times. And we get in a scramble and he ends up on top in the end. It's pretty much how it ends up. So he wins that match. And then I go on to win the national finals. And I end up beating that guy in the national finals. So Darian, I think he may have gotten hurt or something happened. Like for some reason, he just.
So wait a minute. Say the last part. You beat who in the final?
The guy who beat me at the Big Tens.
You redeem yourself in the NCAAs.
Yeah. So I had one loss every year. So I got. So after my whole career, I had 3 losses, once per year, basically.
And what year is this we're talking about? What year do you graduate from Iowa? What's your last year wrestling there?
2010.
So
2010 is
and you've already made mention that you leave the sport as a competitor in 2016. So now you spend the next 6 years of your career world team, U.S. team, Olympic trials again. How does all this end up? This is when I start to know you and start to get to follow your career closer. But take us through that part of your career.
So I ended up making 4 world teams, and in 2012 I was the Olympic alternate. So.
And then you come back to try to make the 16 Olympic team as well?
Yep. And I do not make the team.
And what happens in 16?
Same thing. That you can point to a lot of different things.
Does it eat at you, Brett, to this day, Metcalf? Does it eat at you that you didn't do that? Does it bum you out that you went out on that note? Or how do you, with your mentality and your leadership now, what's your mentality about your career like? Do you think about it often? Does it pinch at you a little bit and piss you off sometimes? Or are you or are you satisfied with your career?
Yeah, here's how I put it, and people ask me, or my wife and I talked about it a lot. You know, like I don't lose sleep at night. You know, I know that I trained and that I did everything right, and that I gave myself the very best opportunity that I could to be a world and Olympic champion. I know that I did deep down. So I don't have regrets from a point of view where I wish I could have done that, or I wish I would have done this different, because that doesn't exist. Now, do I wish I could have had the things I wanted? Yeah, sure. We all have that. But that doesn't mean I get to pout about it. So, I mean, does anything itch at me? I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously growing up as a kid, you know, being an Olympian, winning an Olympic medal was something that you've always dreamed and thought about. But if I take a step back and I reflect on it, you know, did I fall short of that? Yeah. But can I point at something, or can I say that this is the reason why, or I just didn't do things right? No, I know I did things right. I know I did things the very, very best that I could have done them. So I don't lose sleep. I don't lose sleep at night, wishing I would have done something different. Does that make sense?
100%. What is the reason why Brent Metcalf does not go into the MMA world? Because this is 2005 to 2012 is like, this is the years of the Chuck Liddells, wrestler, Dan Henderson, wrestler, Matt Hughes, wrestler, Josh Krosek, right? You name it. These guys are wrestlers. They're making money in MMA. You come out of college, the MMA is bigger than it's ever been. The UFC is in 2016. 2016, the UFC is still owned by the same group, but it's powerful, right? Why do you not make the decision to go into that revenue stream?
Probably the simplest answer is nobody ever asked me if I wanted to. I mean, I could have probably went out on my own, but I had a goal in mind, you know, being an Olympic champion, and I was just set on doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't know, imagine you were a UFC promoter and you would decide to call me one day and said, Metcalf, you seem like you're a mean son of a bitch. I think that this would be something that you'd fit into.
Well, you were though. How did they not find you? You were.
I don't know. It was never given as an option, so I've never even given it 2 seconds. What is your overall wrestling record at this time in 2016?
Do you have any idea from the time you started at 9 years old? Are you 400 and maybe less than 10 losses?
No, I probably got more than 10 losses.
No, you said probably. Do you have more than 10 losses, you think?
In my whole life?
Yes.
Of course I do.
Well, you only had 3 in Division I wrestling in college. And you had 2 in the
Internationally, I'm wrestling 30 matches a year. I mean, I'm not winning every tournament at that level.
Is it, how many losses do you think you have, Brent Metcalf? It can't be more than 10. It can't be more. It's not that many.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of easy to add high school because high school was 0, and then let's say over summertime there's maybe 2 or 3. Then college is another 3.
Okay, so there's 6 losses. Huh?
Yeah, between, let's just say, high school, less than 10 between like all wrestling in high school and college. That'd be fair. But once I got to that, I mean, you got to think, I was wrestling senior level when I was in college. I wasn't placing at these tournaments, So I'm losing twice per tournament that I go to when I was young. By that, I mean, I'm in college and I'm wrestling the Olympic level competitions. I'm not placing in those. So there's 2 losses there.
I can't figure out why you would not get asked to come and to make a career in MMA. Are you a fighter? Can you throw hands? Do you have other combat talents besides the traditional form of wrestling?
I've got no idea. I've never hit a bag in my life. Well, I mean, I have hit a bag, but you know what I mean? Not in a structured workout.
So it would have been a learning experience. You might have got into some jiu-jitsu. You might have got into some boxing. I would have had
to, for sure. If I was going to do it, I've talked to some people before about this. Like, people have said something like, hey, would you take this fight? Would you do that? And I'm always like, listen. And again, just like my wrestling career, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. So you need to give me, I don't know what I need. Is it 6 months, 8 months, 12 months? I need a prep time so that at least I can learn. As far as the jiu-jitsu goes, I'd have to learn how to at least keep myself alive, right? Like, it's just a base skill of knowing, like, all right, this guy's trying to break my arm. He's trying to choke me out. Like, get into these positions so I can at least stay alive in those positions, right? And then basic, punching, just boxing on my feet. Outside of that, I mean, I feel good enough with the rolling around thing and, like, body awareness and maybe, fighting hand-to-hand combat. I have no problem with that. But it would just be the tricky things. Like, I think I'm doing something, and then next, my elbow's dislocated.
That's how it was. That's how it was at Duck Camp. If you can remember, when me and you went at it, I kind of smoked you. Do you remember that? Can you remember that part?
Yeah, I remember really well.
Okay. You've had an okay college career. I mean, you've had an okay wrestling career. Let's just leave it at that. It's we'll just say it's okay when really it's badass. Like you've had an unreal wrestling career. You go into coaching here at Iowa State, pretty average program for a couple years. This year seems to be like, wow, Iowa State's here. Like, you guys are there. Like, how hard has this been for you and your team of what could have been, and this quarantine and this COVID-19 and coronavirus coming in? What's the mentality like? I know your mentality is go, 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 but when you see the effect it has on these athletes, that's detrimental. Like, let's take Spencer Lee. We mentioned him. He wins the Hodge Trophy. He's going in for another NCAA title, and he's told, you can't wrestle. Does the wrestler, that's considered a winter sport? Do they get, or that's considered a spring sport, right? I mean, a winter sport. So they don't get another year of eligibility. Is this correct? Just spring sport does.
Yep. It'll be.
My gosh. How hard is this, Brent, on wrestlers right now and in your team? Is it, am I dramatizing it too much, or was this truly hard to swallow?
It's hard for me to maybe be in their shoes because I'm not in their shoes. Right. I all I can do is reflect back on how hard it would have been for me. And unbelievable, because what's unique about the sport of wrestling, the problem is that all sports are the same. At the end of the day, college athletics, you get to do your sport because of college, right? It's like you're blessed to be able to do your sport. Without the college or without the education, your sport doesn't exist. So having that perspective or that lens makes it clear as to why you wrestled 99% of your season. They're not going to give you a whole nother season back just because you didn't get to wrestle 4 matches at the end of the year, But what's unique about wrestling compared to, let's say, basketball or football, like I've talked to some of those people in my life that were in that, is, imagine a football player. Like, if you told a football player, like, hey, you don't get to go to your bowl game your senior year. Like, that would suck. I mean, everyone likes to go to the bowl, but it's not too big a deal, Same thing basketball. You tell a basketball player, hey, the NCAA tournament's a big deal, but it's like, that's all right. because the season is very, very important. There's a lot of weight put on the season. Compared to wrestling, you could tell a wrestler, you don't get to wrestle one match all season, but you get to go to the NCAA tournament. Boom. No question. Sure. When given the opposite, which is you get to wrestle all season, but not go to the NCAA tournament, because we're judged very clearly by your NCAA tournament result, right? No one, at the end of the day, the record books don't really show that you won all your dual matches. That, like in wrestling, we don't put a whole lot of weight and importance on those things. So
that's a great way to put it.
Hardest is that's your goal. Your goal is to win the national tournament, and you get one shot to do it, and it's in March. So yeah, it's hard on these guys. I think what's unique, not unique, but our team specifically is we are a rising program. We had ups and downs all year. We had guys with injuries. We had had to fill the lineup and stuff. So we really didn't have that great of a regular season as far as maybe expectations. But we had kind of set ourselves up at the end of the year, like we should, to have our guys kind of fire on all cylinders. And we had a really good Big 12 tournament. Our guys went into this national tournament, got themselves some good seeds, which put themselves in good positions to place or win the tournament. You get all the way there, and then you pull the string on it. And what is ultimately tough from my point of view is we're trying to show not only the world and recruits the growth of this program, but even to our own guys, right? Because we're selling them, let's just say a belief. We're pitching them like, hey, guys, believe in us. Do this, because it's going to get us to the promised land, right?
Yep.
Well, they never, it's nice at the end of the season to have success, so those guys it helps them buy in, right? It helps their teammates see the adjustment that one guy made and the success that he had, right? So that helps to continue to grow our program. Well, without that, it was kind of like, man, it was an underwhelming season a little bit, where we had a lot of ups and downs, and we didn't really get to show off what we had at the end, which is I'm not too concerned about it, but it is just too bad as far as the growth of our program. And that I think we were in a great position to really take another step, like you said, to continue to take another step in the right direction.
But you had at least one wrestler that was looking like was going to be an NCAA champion.
Yeah.
How is it?
He was the second seed or the third seed. Well, yeah, I think he was the third seed, but what's that?
Has it affected him big time to not be able to go in there and do it? Or I know you can't put yourself in his shoes, but have you talked to him at all?
Yeah. I mean, it hurts. It hurt all these guys it's tough. You got everything. I mean, we ask these guys, think about it. We ask them to live and breathe wrestling. We say academics is important. That's your priority, but everything in your life, whether it's your nutrition, your sleep, your time that you hang out with your girlfriend, all these things, your life is molded around wrestling, right? Everything you're doing to help your wrestling. We're asking them to make that sort of commitment to the sport and to themselves. And then you pull out their reward, So yeah, it's hard. The individual you're talking about, he's got a great family. He's got a great head on his shoulders. He's very, very strong in his faith. So I think that especially in these times, that sort of stuff can really help you get through when you have,
because he's a senior, right?
No, he's a freshman.
Oh, he's a freshman. Okay. So he's got time.
He's got more time. Yeah. But when you have a clear understanding of, and you're not selfish about me, and you realize that you're a part of a plan and that that things like this happen that you can't explain, I think that faith can really help you get through this. So,
as a coach in the NCAAs, are you satisfied with the level of refereeing and officiating? Is it hard to referee and officiate a college wrestling match? The new rules are coming in. Some get taken out. Then they got to learn the new ones. There's different things every season. Is that a big part of the match and how it affects the match? Because a lot of times you hear somebody like Dana White say, you don't want to leave it in the judge's hands. You want to knock the guy out, tap the guy out, get her or him out of there, right? You don't want it to go to a unanimous or a split decision. Same as wrestling, I would think, but you're scoring, you got points, but it's all that's all subjective up to that referee. Do you want to go in there and just stick the guy? I know obviously you do. That's a dumb question, but Are you satisfied as a coach with the level of that? Because in baseball, you hear all the time, you're asking a guy that's not good enough to be a baseball player to be a guy that's, leaving his mark on that game and the pitches and the outs at the bases and everything. So you really, it's a big responsibility. I don't know if I'm making sense in my question, but I would think that there's a lot of pressure on a college referee when it comes to being on his A game all the time. And are you satisfied as a whole with what you see in college wrestling officiating? Is that a stupid question to even ask?
No, it's not a stupid question, but I mean, I think most college coaches should give you the same answer, which is that not criticize them. Here's the deal is I try not to criticize even during our matches, these refs too much, because I don't believe, just in general, I don't believe there's a single ref out there that wants to screw you. I don't think that maybe there is, but I don't think that there are people out there that want to do your program harm and they want to screw you over. Okay. I think that there's mistakes that happen. There's no doubt. There's guys that make more mistakes than others. I think what gets really tough when you're talking about wrestling is, and it could be this way with other sports as well, but a big thing in wrestling is stalling, right? Well, stalling is just an opinion pretty much, right? There are some clear-cut rules, but even, we have some step-up rules now. Even those rules allow some interpretation of how you thought that guy stepped out, whether he stepped out intentionally or whether he was pushed out. So when you do that, you inherently are going to have clashing, right? Because I'm going to believe one thing and they're going to believe a different thing. So that's what makes it so tough with these refs is basically the stalling thing, which is they're going to see one thing, I'm going to see one thing. I could make the same statement, which is, hey, I've been wrestling my whole life. I know what stalling is. Stalling's pretty easy to see. I know when my guy's stalling. I know when that guy's stalling. We all know it. It's not very hard to see. So when it's happening in a match, it gets frustrating when you're like, what is this guy doing? Like we all, everyone here knows what the right call is. Or that's how it feels at least. So am I happy with the level? I think that there's again, we could tweak and they continue to tweak. The more that we can take judgment calls out of their hands, the less mistakes, how about that, can be made, right? Because I don't think these guys want to decide either. I mean, there's been some big matches last year in the NCAA finals, for instance, decided by a call their ref makes. He doesn't want it. Any ref I've ever talked to, you think he wants to be the reason that you won the match? No, he wants you to win your own match. He just wants to sit back in the background and disappear, So the more that we can take it out of their hands and make it clear cut, black and white, I think the better. But I don't know if that's on them or not, or whether it's on training or, that inconsistency is a problem. One ref thinks that this rule is interpreted this way. Another one thinks it's interpreted that way. So the more consistency we can have across the board, the better too. So I don't think it's the biggest problem.
You should be a politician, Metcalf. That was really politically correct. You need to run for mayor. How important, when you talked a while back, and I know we're getting close to the end of this, but we're going to do this again because I love wrestling and I love learning from you.
Yeah.
You mentioned there was barely a magazine. There was no Twitter. There was no Instagram. There was no Facebook. You didn't even know who Dan Gable was. How important is that aspect of today's sport of getting the word out there? And how important is flow wrestling to wrestling as a whole to show? Because it's addicting, right? And I love flow wrestling. So how important is what the guys at Flow Wrestling are bringing to the table and their mission to get wrestling out there and to showcase it in the right light? Are you happy with that element of the game right now?
I think that let's just call it wrestling media, because 5 years ago, Flow Wrestling was all that exists. But now there's so much out there. I mean, with I'll call it an invention of a rock fan, you pretty much, anybody can be a version of Flow Wrestling, right? Anybody can have their own show and their own talk show and their own reviews and their own rankings and everything. So I think wrestling and media has really taken off, has really blown up, and that does nothing other than help our sport. It pumps attention into our athletes and our sport. It pumps revenue into our sport. All these people are also getting sponsorships to help support their media programs. So yeah, it's been great. But Flow Wrestling was the first dog to kind of take on wrestling and really bring it to another level. And it's crazy to think, I mean, think about the first time I ever went overseas. No one will ever have known what happened, right? So when I wrestled overseas, we were in Russia in some dump hole place. We were wrestling in a barn that only had two sides on the barn, and it was unbelievable. One of the toughest tournaments I ever wrestled in. And then we went down to Dagestan, which is like a very dangerous Caucasus region of Russia. Went down there. We wrestled out in the middle of a field. And I wrestled a 2-time world champion and a future Olympic champion in the middle of this grass field. And no one will ever know those results because there's no coverage. There's no one would have ever seen any of those matches. They were unbelievable.
What were they?
In Russia, it was unbelievable. It was awesome. And just the whole scene. They had the president of the region, the president. So that would be equivalent to like, I don't know, our vice president being at a wrestling match. No one will ever know those because they couldn't see it. They could be, well, that's what Flow Wrestling did. They changed it. So now when there's those events, we can log onto our computer and we can watch it no matter what remote space in the world it's in. We can see it, and there's record of it. And that's something that's really cool from a spectator's point of view. And it helps build interest and it helps tell those stories,
So what were the results in that grassy field in that match?
Those grassy fields. Well, the first match I lost to the 2-time world champ. Again, I'm a little young kid. So I went to this when so there's an eligible year, right? So I had my redshirt year and then I had an ineligible and then I had my, what would you call my
sophomore,
right? My redshirt sophomore year, which is my third year in school, actually.
Yeah.
So I had one redshirt, ineligible, then I wrestled. So during that ineligible year, I went over there and I wrestled a 2-time world champ. I lost by like a point or two, which I thought was great. And then I got screwed. I lost to this kid named Sahin. He ended up winning the Olympics in 2008. And, this is a whole nother backstory. But me going over there was huge because I knew how good these guys were. And for instance, the guy that was the Olympian, and I took the guy down and they just talk about fair refs. They just say no. Like, no, you didn't. I'm like, yes, I did. I just took him down. No, you didn't. So they just screw you. But either way, I'm going from that to my college season in 2008. And I'm like, I can win this tournament. I just lost by a point to a 2-time world champ and I should have beat the Olympic champ. Like, I'm at that level. So for me, as far as like mentality and how important it is, like your belief in yourself, when I stepped on the mat, I was like, I got this.
No
if
problem.
I can do this. And we're seeing that now as these younger crops of kids that are coming through who are competing at the international level and having success. They're winning world titles before they even get into college. Then they're getting into college and they're running the table on guys. And I believe it's because, once you believe that you're at a certain level, and I think that translates to you come to college and you already believe you. So you already believe that you're the best guy. You're not wondering if,
I could see how huge it could be just to go over there, but the power, the confidence that would give you. I mean, these guys are the best in the world. And when you think wrestling, you think Russia, you think Iran, you think those countries of, you don't think of Australia, but I'm not saying that you can't. Like, I don't even think of Canada as a wrestling country, even though I know they have some good wrestlers. I think of America, Iran, Russia, and I'm not even ingrained in the sport like you are. So to go over there in wrestling's backyard, which I guess Rome would be wrestling's backyard, I don't know, but to go over there in wrestling's backyard where these world champions are and to go into a atmosphere like that, it's just so gladiator. It's so Braveheart. Like, that's the picture you're painting to me. But so let's end it on a couple just questions that you don't need to explain to me a lot. Who is the best college wrestler of all time? And if that's a dumb question, you can't answer it. Who is your favorite college wrestler of all time besides yourself?
Favorite college wrestler of all time.
Because I don't think you could say who's the best college wrestler. I mean, you could say Kale. I mean, Kale had an unreal, but John Smith had an unreal. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how to even do that because of the weight divisions and all that.
I'm gonna pick one that most guys would know. I'll say that my favorite college wrestler since I've been in college. How about that? Because you can do that for forever. Would probably be David Taylor.
Wow, I was just going to ask you about DT. Okay, David's
the amount of points that he put up as a spectator outside looking in, I always respected the guy.
David Taylor's coming on the podcast next week. I watched his Penn State career. His injury, just come back from his injury, qualified for the Olympic team. Unfreaking believable wrestler. I got turned on to David Taylor probably, I don't know, maybe his sophomore year watching the NCAAs, because I record him and watch him like 10 times a year, right? I just keep watching him and wishing I could do that. But he is a stud, right? So I have him. He's coming on here next week to talk about his career and the Olympics coming up and what he's done. How good is Jordan Cox with what he did last year without having a point scored against him in all those major tournaments? How good of a wrestler is Jaden Cox? I'm sorry, I called him Jordan.
Yeah, he's good, man. He's good.
Is he the best in the world right now?
Here's the thing. It's hard for me to make judgments like that when I haven't seen the guy compete in the last 3 months. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm not intimately there, I'm not like around him, I can't tell you he's the best right now. And that I'm not going to make a projection that he's going to win this or that, because he's gone up. I think him and Kyle Snyder are going to have to wrestle. So
he's going to heavyweight?
Well, there's the step down from heavyweight.
Okay. So is it called
197 or 210 or whatever the weight class?
Would I be and I love Kyle Snyder. I love watching him wrestle, but I'm going to go out on a limb. And you tell me if I'm wrong, but I take Jaden every day in that match. Now, the strength of Snyder is amazing.
Every day, but I'd take him, sure. You
wouldn't take him every day?
Not every day, no.
Because Snyder is so strong, but Jaden is so athletic, it seems. Like he has he's unorthodox as heck.
When I'd go there. Yeah, I'd go there.
Is he unorthodox?
I just think he's, like you say, he's an athlete, unbelievable athlete, and he works hard too. That's the biggest thing about these guys, which is unique about wrestling too, is being an athlete isn't enough. It doesn't matter what your 40 time is. It doesn't matter how much weight you can lift. You know, you've still got to have a lot of heart. You got to have a lot of guts and determination. And some of these best guys, we mentioned Jordan Burroughs. I trained side by side with him for 5 or 6 years after college. And he was one of the toughest working guys I've been around. So on top of his talent, which everyone always talks about, but on top of that, you didn't win a sprint against him unless you were tackling. You know, he didn't put his head on the mat and quit during wrestling workouts and just say, this doesn't count. No, every single rep counted for him. So I have a lot of respect for a lot of those guys, and Jordan being one of them, because I was maybe in the trenches with him, you know.
Do you still get to stay in touch with some of them?
Yeah, I don't a lot, but I've got Jordan's number. I guess if I wanted to reach out and say what's up. So
he seems to be the one that has become world famous in wrestling.
He has, yeah.
He's got an approach. He highlights his wife and his family and his son a lot. He was voted one of the best physiques in all of sports last year. I don't remember who that was through. Was that a Sports Illustrated deal? Do you remember that?
He was in Sports Illustrated thing where they do like the naked, where they cover up the stuff.
Yeah, but he was also voted like one of the best physiques in all of athletics in the world. Yeah. Which is awesome.
He did it right. He came out at the right time. He definitely tells his story the right way to promote himself. And as far as I know it, I think that his agent is like one of the Williams sisters' agents. So he's got people working for him that are putting him in position to succeed. So
let's bring this full circle. Now you're at a point in your life to where you're on the other side of it, to where you're that dad driving the kid to practice.
Yeah.
You had that mentality your whole life that you wanted to dismantle somebody, embarrass them, absolutely put them into harm's way and painful, and then shake their hand and say, just kidding, buddy, after you whip their ass. Do you look at your son and say, you don't want to do that? You don't want these ears. You don't want this lifestyle of just being beat up every day and the bumps and the bruises and the pulled muscles and the making the weight and all of the stuff that goes into being a wrestler, a wrestling champion, a badass. Do you look at him and say you don't want that, or are you letting him figure it out on his own? Do you make him sit down every night and watch your highlight video? How does he listen to Eye of the Tiger every night with his dad working out in the garage and doing crunchies? How does it work now for Brent Metcalf? We'll end it, taking it full circle now. Here's that kid that you were at 8 or 9 coming back from your bike race and saying, I want to look like that guy with that mask on and all those muscles.
Yeah. To me, I put it in him. I think a lot of times, we talked about this earlier, we talk about a lot of these high level athletes or pro athletes, they don't push their kids into things. And I think that most of the time, because these successful athletes know that where it comes from is you. The success comes from you being driven, and it has to come from you. And if it comes from being pushed into it, it usually doesn't work. Most of the times it's not going to work. So I'm the same way with him in that I expose him to a lot of different sports. I've got him involved in a lot of different things. I'm deciding when. I for sure want to introduce him to wrestling, but it's going to have to come from him. And in the same way, it's going to have to come from his coaches. If I introduce him into wrestling, I'm not going to be teaching him how to wrestle because that's not my job. My job is to be his dad. So I'm going to, if and when I do it, I'm going to put him in a program, and it's the coach who's going to run the show. I'm not going to run the show. And I guess to get to the nitty gritty of it though, is you want to pass down your passion, you want to pass down maybe your mentality, right? The same way that you want your kid to be a good person. I always think too, like, well, if he's whatever sport he's gonna do, I still want him to have these set moral codes. Let's call them that, right? So like, if you're gonna do something, you do it your best. If that sort of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see whether, as a parent, that's something I'm able to stay back off. Let's say I see him, he's quitting or he's not doing his best. I can tell whether I'm able to stay backed off and let the coach do his job, which is what I think needs to happen. Or, finding that balance where he can be a mentor as a parent to continue to teach your kid like good life skills. Because at the end of the day, at least how I look at it, I don't care if he wrestles in college. I don't care if he's an Olympic wrestling champion. I don't care what he does. I just want him to have the passion for something. That something could also be piano. It doesn't matter to me.
Heck yeah.
Passion for something and pursue it with all your heart. And that would be kind of my...
I honestly think you should be either a campaign director, a campaign manager, or just write some speeches. You're very well spoken, Brent. Like I'm very happy that I did this. It's been a pleasure. We're going to do it again. That's Brent Metcalf, Iowa State Wrestling. I can't wait to do it again, man.
Killing ducks, except you're going to have to get me down in front of ducks this time.
I know, gosh. We're going to do it again. I promise you. I'm going to bring you out somewhere to where I have a little bit of control on the migration and we plan it a little bit different.
I want to get in that. I want to do one of the woods hunt, the flooded timbers.
Yeah, come on.
Unbelievable.
We'll handle it.
I heard it's unbelievable.
We'll handle it. I want to come. I want to come to a duel this year. I want to go behind the scenes a little bit, get in the room and just live in your shoes for a day and see all that. We've been threatening it. This coronavirus has kind of got us all wondering when the end is, but let's plan that for next year. And I'll come hang out, maybe go to the Big Tens with you or hang out and something. Yeah,
let's do it, man.
All right, I'm going to tell David Taylor next week what you said. He's going to love hearing that. That's freaking awesome. I had no idea that you were going to say that. I'm a big fan of his too. So
I'm a fan of the guys that like to score points.
He's active, boy. All right, that's Brent Metcalf, Iowa State Wrestling. This has been another episode of This Life Ain't For Everybody. Please continue to support the partners and sponsors that support us. Thank you to Mtn Ops for bringing you this episode of Iowa State Wrestling with my boy Brent Metcalf. What a career, man. Congratulations, brother.
Thanks.
Signing out. This is Chad Belding. Tom, hit that button. This is Leith Lofton. What you gonna do when the money's all gone?